This is CNN Breaking News.
We have more breaking news just coming into the Situation Room. Very disturbing information. Federal prosecutors have just charged a U.S. Coast Guard lieutenant for allegedly planning a terrorist attack targeting Democratic politicians and journalists here in the United States. Our justice correspondent Jessica Schneider has got the details for us. These are awful, awful details. Tell our viewers what you have, Jessica.
Wolf, this was a 49-year-old Coast Guard lieutenant. His name is Christopher Paul Hasson. He was arrested last week, and the details about what he was plotting, a full-scale attack that prosecutors say was against media personalities, politicians, and civilians. All of the details now coming out in a detention memo that's been filed with the court in Maryland. Prosecutors say that this man, Christopher Paul Hasson, was stockpiling weapons. They say they found at least 15 guns and 1,000 rounds of ammunition inside the basement apartment of his Silver Spring home. Silver Spring, Maryland, just a few miles outside of Washington, D.C. And prosecutors in their detention memo that was just filed, they put it very starkly, very stunningly. They put this at the top of their memo saying, "The defendant intends to murder innocent civilians on a scale rarely seen in this country." And that's why they're asking for the judge at a detention hearing tomorrow to hold this suspect. What's quite stunning is that this suspect has been a member of the Coast Guard for many years, most recently assigned to the Coast Guard headquarters in Washington, D.C. The Coast Guard has put out a statement about this, saying that they, in fact, worked with the FBI and the Department of Justice. So it looks like the Coast Guard may have actually seen some red flags, raised them, and been part of this investigation. What's also most chilling is that prosecutors say that this man, the 49-year-old Coast Guard lieutenant, he was actually inspired by a manifesto written by a Norwegian far-right domestic terrorist himself, the name of Anders Breivik. And what's startling about this is that Breivik actually plotted out a terrorist attack in Norway in July 2011, and that attack led to the death of 77 Norwegian citizens. Prosecutors have found a lot in this basement apartment of this 49-year-old Coast Guard lieutenant, including draft emails, and I'll read part of that for you. Prosecutors say that this man, Christopher Paul Hasson, wrote it this way. He said, "I am dreaming of a way to kill almost every last person on the earth. I think a plague would be most successful, but how do I acquire the needed Spanish flu, botulism, anthrax? Not sure yet, but we'll find something. Interesting idea the other day. Start with biological attacks, followed by attack on food supply." So, Wolf, all of these details now coming out. This man, the 49-year-old, was arrested last week. The detention memo really spelling out in stark detail exactly what he plotted. But again, up until just very recently, up until his arrest last week, he was stationed at the Coast Guard headquarters right here in Washington, D.C., but prosecutors saying he was plotting this full-scale attack.
I've been going through the charges here in the U.S. District Court, and it's awful, especially when you go through the list of targets that he wanted to attack, major politicians here in the United States and very prominent journalists as well. Tell us a little bit more about that.
You can see right there, Wolf, that's what prosecutors say that Christopher Paul Hasson was searching, was Googling media personalities, including media personalities from CNN, MSNBC, as well as very prominent Democratic politicians. These were all the names that made up this hit list that was on the computer of Christopher Paul Hasson. So prosecutors say this was in the works for several years. They say he was stockpiling these weapons for 2 years. And again, I'll point to that first line of this detention memo. They say that he was, intending to murder innocent civilians on a scale rarely seen in this country. So really raising the alarm bells, asking the judge in this case to keep him behind bars. But the fact that he was doing this at the same time while assigned to Coast Guard headquarters, working as a lieutenant for the Coast Guard, it is quite stunning here, Wolf.
All right, Jessica, I want you to stand by. Phil Mudd is with us as well. He used to work over at the FBI. If you look at these targets, it's very scary, especially the politicians. He's got Schumer. He's got, he calls her Poco Warren, Senator Elizabeth Warren, Cory Booker, Kamala Harris, Maxine Waters, Ilhan Omar. He's got a whole list of prominent politicians. He refers to Senator Blumenthal as Senator Blumenjew. He's got journalists, including some of our friends here at CNN, like Van Jones and Chris Cuomo and Don Lemon from MSNBC. He's got Joe Scarborough, Chris Hayes. He's got Ari Melber. It's very scary to hear a U.S. Coast Guard lieutenant plotting, according to the U.S. government, to kill these individuals.
Boy, I walk back from this, and I was just reading the report out of this. Thank God for mistakes. You're right in looking at the target list. If you think this target list is notional, think about the devastation we've seen before. Dylan Roof, a few years ago, white supremacist in South Carolina. If you don't see a mistake, you could miss something. I look at what we're seeing in terms of the statements he's made. Focus violence, establish a white homeland, kill almost every last person on earth. I'm going to make a judgment, Wolf, that he said something wrong on the internet or something wrong to a member of his family or friends that led federal investigators to him, because otherwise the line between finding somebody like this who plots in private and finding somebody like this who presumably in this case made a mistake is not that wide. Thank God he made a mistake that led federal prosecutors and investigators to him. One last comment. I think everybody in my shoes would say, without mistakes, people like this succeed. Thank God somebody spoke or he said something wrong on the internet.
In his draft letter, he said, we need a white homeland as Europe seems lost. I am a longtime white nationalist. Yeah. This is very chilling material. We're going to have a lot more on this coming up. Phil, thank you very much.